Hello, it's Chris Bottrell here from Chris Bottrell Photography. I'm doing a small series of tutorial videos that's going to be covering all sorts of aspects of photography and videography shot on the DJI drone systems. So this first video is just an introduction and tell you what we're going to be covering in the up and coming tutorials. I'll just give you a quick background about me. I've been working in film and video and photography for the last 15 years. I do this as a full-time job, so I thought I'd try and share some of my knowledge with you. I'm by no means a drone expert. I'm fairly new to aerial photography, been doing it for a few years now, but so my main background has been ground-based videography and film. So what we're going to be looking at is the first video, which is actually going to be covered in this one. We're going to be dealing with what we are working with, so we're going to be looking at all sorts of aspects of different videos and comparing them to the video that the Phantom 3 and the Inspire 1 shoots. Then we're going to be covering capture settings and filters. Next video will be uncompressing video and using the DJI transcoding tool. We're going to be dealing with colour correction and colour balance in Adobe Premiere Pro and also in DaVinci Resolve. We're going to be covering secondary colour corrections and lookup tables, both in Premiere Pro and in Resolve. We're going to look at compositing in After Effects, and then 3D tracking in After Effects, and then we're going to be looking at photometric basics and photometric advance. So these videos will go into not too great a detail, but will be enough to give you some knowledge that you can actually follow the videos along and sort of like make your footage look good and get the best out of your footage. So without further ado, we'll start with what we are working with. So let's have a look at what we're actually working with here with regards to the Phantom 3 and the Inspire 1. As you know, the video bitrate of the DJI range is a maximum of 60 megabits per second, which is very, very low. Now I'm going to compare them to some other video formats. So if you look at DVD video, which has a range of 3 to 9.5 megabits a second, and then you've got Blu-ray 1080p, which is 40 megabits per second, and then you've got 4K Blu-ray, which is averages around about 108 megabits a second, and then you've got most modern consumer camcorders that shoot in 4K that shoot at 100 megabits per second. So you can see that the actual bit rate on the Phantoms and the Inspire aren't very good at all, but that's not the end of the world. Now rewinding back to sort of like the mid to late 90s, now that was around about the time when most of the cameras that I used to use were first made. Now the average bit rate in the 90s, looking at DVC Pro, DV Cam, then you had your digital Betacam, and then you had Betacam SX. They were all around about 100 megabits per second. Obviously back in those days everything was standard definition, so if you could imagine, you know, the 4K Phantom footage being at only 60 megabits a second, you can see is obviously very, very small. Now since back in the day, we've got a lot better video compression codecs. So the Phantom footage is very, very highly compressed, but if you shoot the footage properly and, you know, optimize your camera and your settings, you can pull out of that some really quite nice footage, and that's what these tutorials are going to be all about, is getting the very, very best out of your camera. So we've already discovered that we are up against limitations with bit rates. Another thing that we're also up against with regards to the phantom freeze in the Inspire 1 standards is the sensor size. Now, the sensor size is just a little tiny bit over 1/2 inch, which was the standard sensor size in the mid-90s. Most of the professional cameras that were around mid to late 90s all used 1/2 inch sensors. So you can see the sensor is for modern day is very, very small compared to the 35mm sensor that I use and shoot on my RAW cameras, which the RAW video, just going back to bit rates, my 1080p RAW video camera, my average data rate, now I'm going to quote this in megabytes per second rather than megabits, but it's around about 102, which is absolutely huge, but it's an absolute pleasure to grade with. So now that we've spoken about the bit rates and the sensors, the next thing to talk about are lenses. Now obviously DJI aren't lens manufacturers; they're not even really camera manufacturers. They make drones, so their lenses aren't going to be anywhere near as high quality as maybe Canon or Nikon, or some of the other larger manufacturers out there. So, but I think they did a fairly good job with their lenses. They're not the sharpest of lenses, and obviously being a fixed 2.8 aperture, they're not going to be as sharp as, say, the Inspire 1 Pro, which you've obviously got aperture control, because every lens has its own sweet spot. And with the standard DJI lens on the Inspire 1 Pro, I believe it's in between 4 to 5.6. But obviously on the Inspires, on the Phantoms, it's not adjustable, so you will get that slightly softer image. So that's the end of this introduction and the first discussion on what we're working with. I'll see you in part 2, where I'm going to be discussing capture settings and filters. And if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe.